And that one, before I move to Dr. Hossam, with these different variables which you've mentioned about affecting SMEs in the great continent of Africa, bringing in Mr. Promise about some of the requirements which are required. Maybe before I come to you, this is something to digest, and you might be able to chip in as you answer your next question. Do you think that you need to be flexible when it comes to your checklist to be able to factor in some of these challenges which are affecting SMEs in our green continent? Because these challenges about inaccurate forecasts, inaccurate sales and operations planning, do you think the bank can have a positive input to make sure that our SMEs are supported on this? This you can be able to respond in the next. You can be able to answer it at the same time you will be answering your next question. But let me come back to Dr. Hossam here, who brings out the cream of experts in the market, and also who brings capacity building to the ones who are already in the business world. So what frameworks or models can SMEs adopt? And these ones I'm talking about both theoretical and practical models, which maybe you might be having to support global best practices. Because our speakers here, some of our speakers have spoken about, having organizations which have their mother companies abroad, and they get support back in Africa and they flourish. But what about our SMEs? What about the SMEs in Africa who don't have any person to any other organization overseas to support them apart from the banks and even themselves? Maybe you can be able to enlighten us in that perspective.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Voliani. I believe in the one sentence that start with basic things first. In any forum, we are just start teaching or monitoring the SME and young entrepreneur about what kind of infrastructure you need to have in order to build your business. You need to understand that any organization must have organizational infrastructure. Such kind of infrastructure comprised from five main elements. First element is the governance. You need to have a clear governance for your system. Governance mean policies, procedures, strategy, reporting line, accountability, code of conduct, conflict of interest. So, the first pillar we are teaching our students to build in order to have a sustainable business is, first one is the governance. Okay. Second one is the structure, the proper structure of the business. Are you going to adopt a centralized procurement structure, or you believe that decentralized will be much more give you more flexibility, or you are going to select some way in the middle, like hybrid structure? Third pillar that anyone would like to have a sustainable business and stable operational model must have. They must start thinking how we can utilize the available technological tools, from IT tools, whether it's cloud-based or even some simple free-for-charge systems. So first is the governance, second is the structure, third one is supporting tools, whether it will be you are going to adopt some technology in your business, or you are going to start outdated already using paper and pencil. Fourth element is the caliber, human resources. Okay, and no business can survive without having the right person in place. So again, I'm just trying to summarize. In order for any business to sustain, it must have a clear operational model built on 5 main elements. We call it organizational infrastructure. Start with the governance. Second is structure. Third one is the tools and technology. Fourth one is the caliber, human resource. Fifth one, and one of the most important one, is the performance management framework. Any business must have a performance management framework. performance management for their human resources, performance management for their financial performance, performance management for operational activities. So saying that having such kind of 5 pillars in place, okay, we can start thinking about that this company, it has a normal or a stable business model. Okay, having such business model in place, ensuring hopefully sustainable business. After securing basic things first, we can start thinking differently how we can tackle the certain problem we are facing in our continent. In Africa, we are facing a lot of challenges from some undeveloped infrastructure, some bureaucracy, some questionable level of transparency and fair practice. So giving or starting your business based on a solid background, solid pillars of those kind of organizational infrastructure, okay, can give you the good momentum to start your business. Second, you need to move to the second stage. Second stage, you need to start think differently how we can tackle such kind of problems. We don't rely on a huge fund from our investors. We don't rely on a long history of our mother companies. So we need to think differently how we can tackle our problem differently. Okay, and I believe every single person in a group of people or in an area, he is one of the most proper solution provider for this area problems. Again, not to take more than such time to sum it up. In order to start a reliable, sustainable business, you need to start with basic things first. Basic things that we need to secure the infrastructure required to ensure sustainable business model, governance, structure, tools, technological tools, human resource, human calibers, and performance management. Securing such 5 pillars, you can start running your business, moving you to think to pursue the second stage of how we can find innovative solution, cost-effective solution, entrepreneurial solution to our problem. And our problem in Africa, it's not it's not hidden. It's about infrastructure, about transparency, about ethical practices, about we know, all of us, we know what kind of problem we are suffering from Africa. Dr. Paul.
Thank you so much. That was a very elaborate and structured models, which are very enlightening. Now, to you, Mr. Promise, we mentioned about technology, that sometimes the best technology in the market might not be the solution to getting funding from our financial institutions. We've already discussed much more about this, but what is critical here is to merge it with the question I'd asked earlier. What are the red flags you see in SMEs operations that discourage funding opportunities?
Okay, I know the first question you came up with was to find out if we can be flexible with our checklist, right? That's checklist of requirement. Of course we are. Maybe because we're a development bank, right? That's more passionate about deepening developmental effectiveness as opposed to making profit. That's not to say we're not sustainable. Of course, you need profit to be able to sustain your operation and then meet your operational expenses as well. Okay, so let me even take our mind back to the period of COVID. Okay, for 2 years, we held back at various homes, by COVID. That period, what we did was to reduce our interest rate, then give free restructuring for those who wanted to restructure. In fact, for those whose principal were going to fall due at that time, what we did was just extend the principal. For 6 months, for 1 year. We're very, 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 very sympathetic to their cause. So that's one of the things we did. Then secondly, if there's any bank that lends on a long-term basis, I think it's Bank of Industry. I'm speaking as Bank of Industry, staff, and also speaking as a private individual who is passionate about entrepreneurship. So I've been able to balance the two. And then I stand in the middle because I want to see how the SME feel. I want to also, align with experiences to be able to also go back to my bosses and also discuss the experience so we can see how we can reshape our policy. But let me note this. When you're designing your policy or you're designing your checklist of requirements, we need to also take into consideration the CPM policy, the certain threshold that you cannot cross. For instance, when you talk about security arrangements, every loan has to be backed by security. But as a BOI, we'll be able to push at some point to even offer loans, right, to an emerging industry without collateral. We did it with creative industry, right? I don't know if some of you heard about the Nolly Fund. The Nolly Fund was a special fund that was dedicated to supporting those in the creative industry, and it came at a zero collateral level. Now, let me also talk about Film House. Today, Film House is seen as one of the biggest, cinema or theater, in Africa. I don't know, maybe West Africa. Let me limit to West Africa. Once Film House came to us, they had no collateral, but were able to design a security arrangement that revolves around domiciliation. So what that means that all the box office revenue was actually going to a particular account and we're debiting at source. That was how they were able to make their first breakthrough, and today they become a giant in the industry. Now we've also done that. We also did that in the creative industry with respect to movie, the movie subsector. So we are flexible when it comes to that. And then in terms of interest rate too, we have the cheapest interest rate. In fact, interest rate, as I speak to you, so we are 700 basis points below what the market offers. Of course, you might think, even if you're going to step it up a bit, we just step it up between 100 or 200 basis points, but it's still affordable by SME. Now, the point is, for Bank of Industry, there are red flags. Actually, you see some customers. Most of the customers that we're dealing with, yeah, they're transparent, but sometimes, like TemiTope mentioned, circumstances can also make you iterate a bit. Not because you're trying to be fraudulent, but because you're trying to survive the times. Okay. Now, for the international companies, I'm not also excluding Nigerian companies or local companies that have done so well. Nigerian distilleries, for instance, was set up 60 years ago. That is a completely Nigerian-owned company, set up by, I think, the first Minister of Health in the First Republic. That company is still existing till date. And I asked the executive director, so what is the secret? I'm always curious when I see things like this, And he said, we believe in two things. One, human capital, right? We ensure that our human resources is trained, and we dedicate a significant portion of our profit to train and retrain our workers. That's number one. Number two, we don't joke with structures. So there's no magic one there. They just did the right thing and they survived the last 60 years. And it has been a family business, which is rare. I was opportunity to be in London Business School, and most of the guys I met there, they actually taught fourth generation in their business. It's all about family businesses. And that's why I like what Mary Stern is doing right now, okay? Mary Stern is actually putting a lot of focus on management of family businesses, which has become an important class in the asset class, an important factor in the asset class, right? So transparency. What international companies doing well in a foreign land, right? Yeah, they are backed by their governments, like Chinese. Chinese comes in an industry and overtake you. Today, the Lebanese have almost taken over the restaurant business in Nigeria, in Lagos in particular. When it comes to restaurant business, fine dining in particular, what are they doing right? You see, some of these guys, right? So when you look at them, you think they are magicians. But the fact of the matter is that they're getting external support. Once a government is able to reduce the vagaries of your external factors, they make the environment conducive for SMEs. So when you see customers who are owing, and you begin to call them bad debtors, there could be something that must have happened, not because they want to actually defraud the bank, but maybe because circumstances change or dynamics changed. Even like in BO, I will always say, if you're not going to give this person this loan, or you're not going to give this company this loan, please, a quick yes is better than a delayed no. Because by the time you be giving the person the loan, the dynamic must have changed. in terms of equipment pricing. Procurement must have changed. Market must have moved, and so on and so forth. So by the time you're pumping the inflow, right, you see the person struggling to either he's battling with exchange rate that was at 400 when he applied, and now the exchange has moved to 1,500. How does he reconcile that? That means dead before life, right? So there are many dynamics. So our government, TemiTope talked about government policy. Government can intervene through policies. And that's why sometimes I wonder what the minds of this world, the Chamber of Commerce, actually doing. They should be playing that strong advocacy in that respect, right? Talking about policy issues. Today, shea butter guys are angry because they said you just went ahead to ban shea butter without adopting a gradual process of banning shea butter. Some of them must have, stockpiled inventories. Some of them must have been surviving by raw material exploitation because they can't access affordable capital to set up equipment to be able to process the shea butter you want them to process. So with that policy alone, the price of shea butter has fallen. So if that guy had picked up a loan, how would you expect him, to maintain his debt record? Are you going to call him a bad debtor or a bad customer? So our government should begin to do this. Chinese government helped them. Chinese government even help them to dominate industries in foreign land today. So they look at industries, they come into your construction, they take over your construction. They come into your retail, they take over your retail. They come into your manufacturing, they take over your manufacturing. And they even stay in your country for the next 60 years because they're getting cheap loan overseas. So what they come to take from you is just working capital, in a sense. Sometimes they even take the assets. They take the fund from you and buy machines from their country. So what it means is that no Chinese investor in Nigeria will procure equipment from Europe or procure equipment from America. They'll rather procure equipment from China. So what does that mean? The circular flow of income back to China and out of China. So you take money from China, you come to invest in Nigeria, you also repatriate capital. You also buy equipment. Let me tell you, if you're going to access funds from what do they call them? Europe, EIBs, European Investment Bank, or from China Exim Bank or so. The first condition is that you must procure at least 80%. That if they want to be charitable with you, 80% of the equipment must be bought in that country because that is where they produce. Now they want to be able to create market for their machine producers. They want to be able to even have influence from because money they've given to you was given to you at a subsidized rate. They also want you to repatriate capital back into their country. So that's the kind of support that they get. Now, let me also talk about the creative industry. In South Africa, if you're going to produce film in South Africa, you get what called tax rebates. In fact, they look at the cost of production, the cost of producing a particular film, okay, and they give you a percentage of that cost. Why the Nigerian guy is still struggling, to even struggling to pay for production or to sustain his production cost? That guy had gone far.